Hi everybody, it's me, Benjamin Krudwig, and this is Design Time. Today, I'm going to be giving you a very basic primer on color and textiles, and how color is affected by the different structures in all sorts of different textile sorts. So we're going to be talking about color in regards to crochet, knitting, weaving, and spinning, and how each of them affect color in a different way. So the very first thing that I want to talk about is just the basic principles of color. So as we know in painting, you can create other colors by mixing colors together. And the pigments mush together and you get a very even color. So when you're thinking about colors, we have the basic primary colors, which are yellow, red, and blue. This is pretty common in most worlds, except for sometimes in printmaking. You're thinking about CMYK, which is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And that's how you get better color mixing, or more true color mixing to some people. However, for the purposes of this, we're going to talk about them in the basic things that you learn in school, in art school, and in primary school. So these three colors, the yellow, blue, and red, are what we would call primary colors. In painting, if you were to mix these together, you would get secondary colors. So if you mixed blue and yellow together, you would get green, blue and red, you'd get purple, red and yellow, you'd get orange. Then you can mix the secondary colors with either primary colors or more secondary colors and get what's called tertiary colors. So that would be orange-red or yellow-green, that sort of work. In textiles, you don't really get true color mixing. What you can do is, with your yarn, it's your filament here, you're never going to be able to really pull this apart and put it back together again where the colors are truly mixed. That's just not going to happen in most aspects of textiles. Um, so each of these different textile arts use yarn differently. And in so doing, when they use yarn differently, it also means that you get different color play. And you might also not be able to achieve certain color play with certain textile arts. So the first example I want to give is crochet. And this is a color work hat that I was working on here. So you can see I have stripes, I have the letter A in this. And the way that crochet works is that you're, at least with single crochet, you're creating knots over and over and over again with your crochet hook. And what that ends up doing is part of the previous row is actually covered up by the most recent row. So if you see here, this row of cream, the top edge of that is actually getting covered over by this bluey, or by this green. This This causes the color to just overlap, and you don't actually get any color mixing there. With these stripes, you can see that they're not exactly really straight or really even. But if you wanted to do color work, like you see in the letter here, I know it's upside down, what you're doing is you're trying to carry yarn around the back and the sides, or you're crocheting over color. And you can't really get proper color mixing, so you're not going to see, if you mix blue and red together, you're not really going to see purple. One way that you can achieve certain color mixing in crochet is by holding your yarns together as you work. So you would take both strands and you would just crochet with it, you know, like it was one yarn. What this will do is it'll kind of jumble up the yarns together as you're working, and it'll create what looks like a different color. It's not really going to be that much of a different color. However, it will read that way a little bit further away. So after crochet comes knitting. And with knitting, you do get a little bit more color interaction. This is due to the way that the yarns are
interlocked as you knit, they don't really cover over the previous row as much as crochet does. Um, it's um, it's a fact that crochet uses more yarn than knitting, and sometimes it's actually about 5 to 10% more yarn than knitting. And part of that is due to the knot structure of crochet. And so because there isn't as much of a knot in knitting, um, the spaces, especially on reverse stockinette or the purl side of things, you can see one part of the loop. Let's see if I can do this. One part of the loop is one color, and then the other loop that's right below it is a different color. And sometimes the way that that blends is actually kind of in almost like a staticky look. You can also do the same thing as you do with crochet by holding yarns doubled, and it's called a marled yarn, and that will also sort of read a different color. This is a self-striping yarn, and here I am using, this is my Reeds and Rushes pattern, Reeds and Rushes cowl pattern that's on Ravelry for free. And this is hand-spun yarn that I spun for the Shacked blog. And you can see in particular, actually, this is a really good place right here. You have this darker green and this lighter green, and you can see where they overlap here. The darker green is kind of up into the lighter green. And that is creating a little bit of color play here. If these colors were a little bit more uneven and not as stripy, or the stripes were thinner, we would get a lot more color play and color interaction here. And you might even get some color blending. You can also do color work with knitting. So this is a swatch here. It's kind of like a little leaf or tree pattern. And if you were to do really fine patterns here, you would get a lot more color play. From far away, this might read, I mean, it definitely reads as a pattern, but if it was more mixed, it would read as a light blue as opposed to white and medium blue. But that would be like changing every other stitch. You're knitting every other stitch a different color, and then the next row you would stagger that so that the colors don't line up on top of each other and create stripes. It would create more of a static pattern that way as well, and it'll read more of its own color from far away. Now, with weaving, this is the one textile art that you actually start to get real color play here, and that's due to the structure. And the structure of weaving is you have your warp threads, which is the vertical threads, and then you have the weft threads, which are the threads that go back and forth left and right. A mnemonic that I use is that they go weft and right. That usually gets some groans from my students in my classes, but that interaction between those threads means that you're seeing half of the threads are the warp threads and half of the threads are the weft threads. So if your warp is one color and your weft is the other color, you're going to see those colors equally in the fabric. I have a swatch here somewhere. Was in front of me. Here it is. So this is a swatch, and if you see it back here, it looks kind of like one color blended together. If I were to turn it on angle, let's see. That looks a little more orange, and that looks a little more gray. That's due because if you look even closer, you'll see that my vertical threads are orange and my horizontal threads are gray. However, because of the way that they're moving over and under, if you look at it from the different angles, you're going to see one color more dominant than the other. So you can see it kind of flash from gray to orange, gray to orange.
And then when you have it far enough away, it just looks like a muddy orange or a muddy gray. That's it. Here's another version. This is a check, or sometimes called a plaid, but because it's two colors and it's not really like a true plaid, it's a check. And I have a brownish gray and a natural color. And you can see there are squares of like the natural and a color of the brownie color, but then they mix here where the stripes overlap. And you get a medium color between the two of them. The beauty with weaving is that, so the plain weave is when you see half and half warp threads, half weft threads. And that's in a balanced plain weave. You can do unbalanced plain weaves, so you can do a weft-faced plain weave, so that means that you'll only see the weft yarn. And that's what you're going to be noticing in a lot of tapestry work. And then you will get warp-faced techniques, which you see in a lot of inkle weaving or band weaving, card weaving, where you only see the warp colors. A lot of what I do is on a harness loom or a floor loom. So what that means is that I have a floor loom that raises certain threads and lowers other threads, and it creates patterns. I like Twill, which is a diagonal pattern, and depending on how many threads are up and how many threads are down, my weave can actually change the dominance, the color dominance of what I'm working on. So recently I just wove 5 different scarves on one warp. My warp was black with a gray stripe running down the center of it. And for each scarf, I chose a different weave structure and a different color of yarn, as well as, in a couple of cases, different thicknesses of yarn to create my patterns. So I have them over here, and I'm going to show you the difference. And what you're going to see is that the the color dominance is very interesting between each scarf because you get a very different effect. So the first one I did was with a diamond twill pattern, and this is using a dark blue bamboo on the black and gray. And it's really interesting because the bamboo reflects light much more than the cotton and the silk do. So the black is cotton and the gray is a cotton silk blend. Yeah, so you can really see that. And each of these scarves, I did a plain weave section for the header and the footer, and then I went into the pattern. And what you can see is in the plain weave, it's all very balanced. So you see the black and the blue pretty evenly. But then once you go into the actual pattern, you see certain areas that are blue dominant and certain areas that are black dominant. And that is completely based on how the threads interchange. And then on the back side, it's the opposite. So you can see this side is actually a little bit more black dominant, and this side is more blue dominant. And that's just based on which colors are up and which colors are down. So the next scarf that I wove was with this electric green. And this one is more weft-faced, weft dominant. And that's because of the way that I wove this. What's happening is that there's a lot of floats in the weft, and so it actually takes up a little bit more space in the fabric itself, and you're seeing more of the weft. It does create more of a dense fabric. It's still very soft. It has a nice hand to it, but it's definitely going to be a little bit thicker. You'll notice that this side and this side are almost identical because they are. And, I did a very balanced weave on this one so that the back and the front are nearly identical. But it's definitely green dominant. You can hardly see the black in here. So the next one I wove is this red twill. And this one fascinates me for many, many reasons. So it is a balanced weave. So that means that you are seeing equal parts of the black or the warp and you're also seeing equal parts of the weft. However, the weft yarn is a little bit thicker than my warp yarn, and so the red is dominating just slightly because it raised up out of the fabric once I washed it. And that creates a lovely texture. It's, you know, it's a very, very nice texture. However, it does make it more red dominant. What I love is this gray stripe in the center, or off center here. Um, you actually see it a little bit better than you do in some of the other scarves. And part of that is because it's more balanced. And the red is kind of making it almost like a pinky gray color, but then the red really stands out of the black, you know, but it blends more with the gray. I find that part fascinating. Um, the gray is thinner than the black, so it's much thinner than the red. So the red is overtaking the gray just a little bit more than it does the black. So after that one, I did one using the same yarns that I used in the warp. I used them in the weft. And what I love about this is that you're getting an interesting grayscale pattern. So in these, in the fully black sections, you get that nice dark black. Then in the gray, when it's gray on gray, you get a lovely light gray. But then in these stripes here, it's gray dominant. And in these stripes here, it's black dominant. So you do get different shades of gray based off of which one is dominant. But you're only seeing a light gray and a dark gray. There are no other colors present, truly present here. What you're seeing is a blending of the colors. You can kind of see it when I tilt it, that you get the gray dominant and the black dominant. Now this is another really fun example of just how a color or how a weave structure balances. So this is a lovely aqua scarf. And the way that I wove this one is it's a lot like the red one, but the chevrons are actually kind of dotted, if you will, or more of a plain weave chevron. So it's a little bit more balanced, you know, but you do see like these nice black lines here that are very even, and then the blue is a little bit more faded. The thing that I found very interesting about this one is that the values of the blue, the aqua, and the gray were very similar, so they blended together very nicely, and you get this very, very light aqua color right here. What I love in particular about this scarf is that it's reversible. So this side is more aqua dominant, and the other side is more black dominant, just because of how the weaving works. So you can see them together here. What I love about weaving in color is that with weaving, I mean, with knitting, you can also change your gauge, your swatching. You can use finer needles with finer yarns. But with weaving, the finer your yarns and the finer your set goes, the more color mixing that you can get. Something that is actually very popular among weavers is doing something called a color gamp. And frequently they'll do it in plain weave, and then they'll also do it in some patterned weaves. So a color gamp, what that is that you warp up your loom with a series of colors of the rainbow, and then you weave with those same colors in an even square grid in the weft. And what happens is that you get little squares of colors where they overlap, and you can see what the color mixing is going to look like at the end. That's going to be one of my next projects after I clear off my loom. I'm going to do a color gamp, and I'll share it with you here on the channel. So that's a very brief primer on crochet and knitting and weaving and how colors work there. And I am going to do more videos on more specific color play, like how to choose colors for a project and the basics of of color theory. So we're going to talk about value, we're going to talk about color mixing, color harmonies, and all that sort of stuff. The one thing that I want to mention before I go is spinning. So with spinning, you can actually get a little bit more color mixing that's more similar to painting, where you're blending pigments together. And that's because, let's see if I can do this. If you think about it, fiber is just really long pigments. You know, you get staple lengths, you know, that are about 5 or 6 inches for most wools. And you can mix them together with other colors using a drum carder, or I like to use hand carders for small things. So I'm going to show you how to mix color. And I just want to say, so I'm starting with a really, really light blue. It's practically white, but there is some blue dye in here. And this really fun bright green. And I'm actually going to remove just a couple of bits of each one so we can compare afterwards. But I'm going to start by loading my carder here. And what I'm doing is I'm just laying this fiber down onto the teeth. And then I'm going to take my green and put it on top. And I am dealing with more green than the white-ish blue, the light blue. So that will mean that I'm going to get a green dominant mixture. So I take my other card and I walk it across, blending it together. And I'm a switcher, so a lot of people will just go back and forth. I've not been able to do that very well. So to get a really homogeneous mixture, and what that means is something that's really well blended, I like to go back and forth about 5 or 6 times. It also helps when you're laying the fiber down to really alternate where you're putting the fiber. So I'm just going to do it a couple more times here. So unlike paint, you're never going to get a truly homogeneous mixture because the paint molecules or pigment molecules are much finer than any fiber out there. Even Kiviot, which is like really, really, really fine, you're not going to get a truly blended color. So you can see against the original colors, it's actually been subdued a lot more compared to the green, and it's gotten a lot more green compared to the light blue. So that's a really easy way to blend colors. And what will happen after I spin this is that the colors will blend even more into a really light green color. So you can see the difference. So here's the original bright green, and here it is mixed with the light blue, the practically white. So that's one way to actually create more blended colors, more blended yarns. So if you were to want to knit or crochet with those yarns to get those really nice blends, you can always hand mix it and hand spin it yourself. So again, this is just a primer for the video. If you want more of this kind of information, please put your questions down below in specific questions. So do you want to learn more about the weaving aspect of it, the knitting, spinning, crochet? And I'm happy to do separate videos on each of those fiber arts, each of those textile arts. If you really like this kind of content, please subscribe to the channel. Please hit the little bell icon on the bottom. That'll tell you anytime that I upload a new video.
And also be sure to follow me over on Instagram and on Facebook with Benjamin_Krudwig for Instagram and Benjamin Krudwig Fiber Arts and Design over on Facebook. Please, please, please let me know what else you'd like to see. And as a side note, if you're watching this as it comes out, which is the Friday after Thanksgiving 2018, please know that I'm having a Black Friday to Cyber Monday sale in my Ravelry store. All of my patterns are half off or free. No coupon code necessary, it's just already there. And then 4 out of 5 of the scarves that I just showed you are actually for sale in my Etsy store. And my Etsy store is etsy.com/shop/BenjaminCollin, and that's spelled Collyn. And I'll put links down in the down bar for you to find those. So please let me know how you liked this video, and I will see you for the next one. Bye.